Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mike and we are looking at another sword review here today. But before I do, if this is your first time coming by, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please leave a like and subscribe. Hit the notification button there, the little bell icon, so that you can see upcoming new reviews and stuff like that. And if you're returning to my channel, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have something very cool to show you guys today. So yes, we have another sword to review today, and I've been working on this one for quite a while. I had some family issues that I had to deal with, so this took me a lot longer than I anticipated, but I am finally done, and I can finally give you guys my opinion of the Kingston Arms Atrim Cutlass, designed by the famed and well-known Angus Trim, famous swordsmith and sword designer, I think right here in the United States. So let's take a look at this sword. So before I even get into it, I'll let you know where I got this. I got this at Cult of Athena. You can get it in a variety of different vendors, but that's where I got it. I'll put a link down in the description below. It's a $398 sword, so it's not particularly cheap. However, it is probably, you know, within starting to get into the mid-range of functional swords when it comes to pricing. So before we actually take a look at the blade, I want you to take a look at this sheath that it comes with. That's right, it is a large leather sheath, not a scabbard. There's no wood lining or anything in here, but it's very high quality leather. Well, maybe not very high quality, but good quality leather. Usually things like this come out really cheap within this price range, and this is actually very well done. It's a stitched, like stacked leather style of sheath, much like you would find on a Bowie knife or something like that. But take a look at that floral stamping and just that, you know, floral and leaf stamping pattern there. It is absolutely beautiful, and I actually really like it. It's very nice that Kingston Arms decided to go ahead and do something like this for this sword, and I actually find it very interesting because I have had a couple other Kingston Arm medieval era reproductions, and they have very cheap and sort of uninspiring scabbards that they send along. Very basic. This is actually quite a change and something very nice, and the sword fits very well in here. There's basically no movement, and it does have a little bit of retention, but not that much. The sword does draw and sheath quite easily, but for the money that you spend on this is a very nice addition, and I love the color, and I'm very pleased with it. So now that I've talked about the sheath enough, let's talk about the sword, because this is what you guys have all come here to see. So guys, this is a very unique sword design, and it's one that I really enjoy and I really like. So what do we have going on here? I guess the question is, what type of sword is this, right? Because we love to classify things and put things in boxes so we can try to figure out and just decide what they are. Well, it is definitely a sword. It is called a cutlass, at least that's what it's advertised as. How much is this actually what I would consider a cutlass? I would say not very much. But it has many different design elements from many different types of swords. So if we take a look at this blade, and I will show you in detail the different features of this thing, but let's just talk about what it is, what I think it is inspired by, at least. And what we have here is a very thick, a lot of distal taper, and we'll talk about that, but a very wide blade. It's got 3 fullers here, and this is a blade type that looks a lot like a falchion, and that's really, I think, where most of the inspiration for this sword is. I think it's mostly just considered a falchion, but you know, because it has that shape that you would normally see on a falchion blade, and it feels a lot like one as well. Now when you start to take a look at the hilt, you start to see that it has kind of a complex hilt design. It has all of these bars and the side ring here for hand protection. That screams a lot of something like a side sword would have of the late medieval period or Renaissance period. So it does have that really cool swept hilt design for added hand protection. But when you take a look at the actual grip construction, what you do have here is a wheel pommel and a grip shape and style that is a lot like a falchion. So I like to consider this a falchion with a complex hilt construction for added protection. And that's really how I would classify it. How you guys look at it, I don't really know. I don't really think that's too important. I think what's important is how good is the sword and how does it function and how does it handle? Well, we'll talk about the handling in a minute. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the different components, and then we'll go ahead and talk about how it handles, and I'll show you guys some cut testing footage. So here's the hilt portion. We've already talked about the fact that it has a wheel pommel, much like a falchion would have had. This design is a recessed nut construction. Now, I know some people out there are not a fan of the nut construction when it comes to hilts. Now, Angus Trim is actually a very big fan of them. He does them on a lot of his designs, including his own work, his high-end stuff. And I will say that I had absolutely no problem with this type of construction on this sword. And all the tests I did and everything, I only had to tighten it just a hair after I did a little bit of abusive wood cutting with it. But other than that, it held up just fine. It's very, very secure. There is no movement. It's very tight. And if you guys can hear this, there is you can hear the very slight ring there telling you that everything is actually tight in the hilt construction. So as far as this particular design is concerned, this worked out great. I don't have any problems with this style of design. And if it's done correctly, it works awesome, and I think this is here. Now, the finish on this hilt, on these fittings, and the rings and the bars, is a stainless steel material, which I actually really like because it allows you to not have to worry about rusting and corrosion and cleaning it all the time. But they've done it in sort of a stone-washed matte gray finish, which is awesome because it contrasts nicely with the satin finish of the blade, and it just looks really, really nice. It doesn't really look 100% modern like you would with like a shiny stainless steel or something like that. So very, very nice choice of materials. And the grip itself is a leather wrapped grip with a cord impressed texture, and it's a wood core grip. And you can see the seam here. It's actually very nicely done. It's not very prominent. And the grip itself is actually very, very comfortable. And the leather that they chose is not really the highest quality leather, but it is, it could be a fake leather, although it actually might be a real leather. Either way, it's not super high quality, but it is done nicely and it feels very good, and the texture is very nice. So we're going to take a look at the other portion of the hilt here, the bars, and you have a little bit of shaping here just for some added aesthetical value, and you have an upswept quillion here. And so this is just a really attractive design for me. And if you're into studying the martial arts systems that go with this type of sword, you can fight with this sword with a forward guard because you have a little bit of extra hand protection. So just an interesting side note. And so people like to see this, the gap in the cross guard. There is a considerable gap. It is to be expected. It's worse on one side than it is the other. But the sword sits in there quite nicely, and interesting to note, you can kind of see that there's a lot of space right here where the shoulder of the blade sits. And I didn't really notice any type of looseness or wiggling of the blade or anything in there. So in terms of function, it's fine. You get the little Kingston Arms logo there on the blade. And now let's talk about the blade. So you have a very wide but very broad blade, but it has a lot of distal taper. Check out the distal taper on this thing. I mean, the distal taper on this is savage. It starts incredibly thick and then it thins out almost instantaneously, and then it gets very, 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 very thin towards the end of the blade there. So the distal taper of this thing allows it to have a lot of nice ability to be very nimble and maneuverable in the cut, and I actually really like it a lot. If this blade did not have this type of distal taper, I can guarantee you right now it would not handle half as nice or even a quarter as nice as this does, and it'd feel a lot like a crowbar, as we like to say. But as it is, it's actually quite nimble and feels very, very nice. You can move this thing around quite easily, and you do feel that most of the weight is centered here, and that's okay, because that's kind of where you want it to be. You don't want it to be centered too much into this area, because then you start to have a very awkward, heavy feeling sword. And I can tell you guys that this thing does not feel heavy at all, and is very, very comfortable to use. Now, there is a possibility to have this edge here sharpened if you want to put your own edge on there, the false edge. A lot of falchions and sort of messer blades did actually have a little bit of a false edge sharpening here. This sword didn't come with that edge sharpened, but you could easily put your own edge over here if you have the knack for that sort of thing. Now, the edge that it came with, the factory edge, was actually quite sharp, and a lot of the testing that you're going to see, the cutting that I did, was done with the factory edge, and that's something that I really appreciate. It sucks to get a sword, functional sword, and that the edge is not good enough to cut your simple backyard materials that we like to do, like water bottles or even pool noodles or tatami or anything like that. If the edge is not good and you have to go in and do your own edge sharpening, which I have to do frequently, it kind of sucks. It's very nice to have a sword that comes right from the factory with a nice edge. Now, the blade design itself is actually quite unique. It's blunt all the way up to about here. So this whole first portion of the blade, this thick portion that you can see, is blunt. It's almost like a huge ricasso, and that, I think, is for parrying. If you're going to parry down here, you have all that extra strength. And then you can see the blade starts to thin out quite drastically after that first portion of the ricasso. And it does have triple fuller blade, 3 very interesting fullers. And I say interesting because they're all different sizes. You have a short fuller, a medium type fuller, and then a longer fuller up here on the false edge. They don't necessarily terminate in the same spots on both sides, and as far as the blade having waves and ripples, it has quite a bit that are noticeable. Now, that doesn't really bother me in this particular price range, and there are even really high-end swords that have that type of waviness and rippling along the flats. That's showing you that this is a hand-forged blade. And like I said, it's very common. It doesn't really bother me, and it's not excessive, but it is there. And but however, the edge is perfectly straight and nice. There's no waviness or rippling in the edge, and that's very important for cutting. And like I said, it came very, very sharp. Now I honed it up a little bit more with a sharpening stone that I have, and it made it even much sharper, and it was very, very easy to do. So overall, guys, this design is very, very compelling and nice. And if you're into the falchion design or the messer design, this is a very, very compelling offering by Kingston Arms, because there's really not a whole lot out there that is like this sword. I actually can't think of hardly anything that has this type of design and features, this amalgamation of different historical designs in one sword like this. This is quite a unique design, and it's actually the prime thing that drew me to it. Actually, I love falchions and messers, and so I saw this blade profile and type, and I was like, oh my god, that's cool. It's a falchion. But then I looked at the complex hilt, and if you know me, I like 19th century military sabers, and I also like, Renaissance side swords and stuff like that. So I saw this, and I was like, that is the coolest amalgamation of designs that I've seen in a long time. So let's go ahead and take a look at the cutting that I did. I did slight abusive testing, not a lot. I don't think I showed a lot of wood chopping or anything that I did with this, but I did do some, and it held up just fine. take a look at the cut testing. I had a lot of fun with it, and then I'll come back and give you guys my final opinion of this Kingston Arms Angus trim designed Cutlass. Okay, real quick before we get into the cut testing, I just want to bring up a couple of points. One, it is a 9260 high carbon spring steel blade, which is a pretty good steel for swords. It's very similar to 5160. It's a spring steel. It has great flexibility, a lot of nice edge retention, and durability. So if it's heat treated correctly, which I believe this one is heat treated just fine, it's a very good steel for swords. Now, steel is not always, as I mature more in this hobby, I do realize that steel type is becomes less important once you realize the importance of heat treatment and the tempering process when it comes to swords. So although a lot of people take steel very seriously, or the steel type, and you know, obviously it's a factor and it's one not to be you know, ignored, I think heat treatment and tempering is very, very important, and that kind of gets overlooked when you start considering steel types. And this sword is heat treated very, very nicely, and it's made out of a great steel type. The other thing I just want to mention before we get into the cutting is Angus Trim did not make this sword. He designed it in collaboration with Kingston Arms, which I think is an affiliate or a subsidiary of Hanwei. You can get the swords at Cas Iberia. That's the main distributor here in the US, or that imports into the US. And so along with Hanwei and other sword brands and stuff like that, Dragon King and whatnot. So just to let you know, Angus Trim did not make this sword. Angus Trim does make swords. He makes his own stuff. They're very high-end products, and they're beautiful, beautiful examples. And I'd like to get my hands on one of those myself. But he, along with Kingston Arms, helped. Actually, he made the design for this sword, and Kingston Arms carried out the execution and the production of it. So I just want to clear that up. I don't want anyone thinking that this is an Angus Trim produced sword. It's just designed by him. He does a lot of designs for different companies, and this is one of his really cool designs. So just thought I would clear that up. All right, let's check out the cutting. Okay guys, now that you've seen the test cutting footage, I can give you guys my final opinion and let you know whether or not I think that this sword is worth your money. So, as you can see from the test cutting footage, the thing cuts amazingly well. It's a beast in cutting. The handling characteristics are just, are really nice. It's a nimble sword to move around. You don't really have to do a lot of effort to make it start and stop. It's a joy to use and handle, and it feels great, and it has a very comfortable grip. One thing to note, if you're going to grip up here towards the guard, that's kind of where I think the sweet spot is when holding this grip. If you start to grip down by the wheel pommel, anybody who knows and who's used a wheel pommel, sometimes these edges here can dig into your palm and can be a little bit uncomfortable. These are slightly rounded, so I didn't really notice it too much, but it is a feature of swords that have wheel pommels that if you're gripping down by that pommel, you are going to feel just a little bit of a hot spot, but overall, no problem. So it cut extremely well, guys, and I love how you can actually hear a little bit of a ping or a swing sound when you're cutting through bottles and stuff with this sword. It just has a great audible sound, which is, I guess, just a plus. Yeah, it's really cool. So anyway, it cuts well, guys, and it's just an extremely fun sword to use, and this would make an incredible weapon, I think, in a self-defense situation, or even as a battle weapon. It's really nice and quite functional. So I highly recommend this sword. If you can't tell, I'm kind of glowing with it because it's just so fun. I think the price is right. It's not a cheap sword, but it is the dynamics, the handling dynamics, the functionality, the sharpness, the design features, the historical inspiration, everything about this sword for me is just, and the really attractive sheath that it comes with, all for just under $400. I think it's a fantastic deal, guys, and I highly recommend checking this blade out if this is the thing, if this type of blade profile and design is something that you're interested in. So thanks for coming by, guys. I really appreciate it. Stay tuned. I have a lot of cool things coming up. I just wish I had more time to get out here and make videos. And I have something different that I'm going to introduce on the channel that is not really sword related, that I'm going to throw out there and see if you guys enjoy it. And yeah, stay tuned for that. It's kind of sword related, but it's a different topic, so I'm going to introduce it to the channel. Thanks a lot, guys. Till next time, stay safe, have a great rest of your week, and stay tuned. Bye.